What's going on, everyone? I'm Brandon, and this is the 90-Day Earth Bag Challenge. We're on day 23 of this dome challenge, and it was with the last episode that I was able to showcase a little bit on how I'm taking advantage of the waste material from all of the sifting that we're doing and continuing to do. So I was able to show how I've created the first couple of earthworks. So I've created the first Zuni bowl. And then we've also started repairing the driveway path and then also setting the driveway path up for stopping and slowing more of the rainwater. And when we're looking at permaculture, this is one of those critical, kind of crucial points or principles we can think of for utilizing and taking advantage of our landscape's materials that it has to offer. So in our case, with creating the sandbag dome, we're doing all of this sifting, so we're able to separate all of this material. And in that way, we're able to not only use that material for the double domes, but also to expand outward in the different earthworks that we're going to do on this landscape, and also the earthworks for creating more defense around the dome structures. And now that we've actually covered a little bit on the waste material, we're going to jump back to the dome. So I had left off on the 4th level of sandbags, and that's where this level is actually pretty critical right now because I need to start installing some window frames. But actually, before we get into the inside of the dome, I want to take you to the sifting station because the concept and design of this dome is actually pretty critical in the water usage, and especially seeing as we're in a very hot, dry, and arid climate. Obviously, here in the desert, water is a precious resource. So in taking the water situation into consideration, that's really where we can fundamentally make a little bit better decisions or create options for how we want to cut down on our water usage. And so the sandbag dome is actually lower on the scale of water usage. So when we're thinking about traditional and conventional building, we're using hundreds or thousands of gallons of water for mixing all of the concrete platforms and all of that, everything else that comes with it, the foundation and stuff. So in this case, using the materials on the landscape in the most efficient way as we can find out that we're going to cut down on our water usage, especially for the sandbags, because the water is really just meant for kind of the cohesion or the glue, you could think, of all the particles and creating more of a brick out of the sandbag. And so that's where you'll find when I'm mixing, I really don't need that much water. I mean, for the level that we're on with the sandbags, I've only used less than 100 gallons. I mean, maybe 70, 75 gallons, I think, total so far. So very minimal water usage. And what we're really just looking for when we're mixing with the dirt is just so there's cohesion, just making a clump with that dirt. That's all we're really looking for, and for it to hold its shape somewhat. Because in that way, when we go to stack the bags now, because we're going to be tamping everything down, we're going to be compressing all of that dirt inside of the bag, and the bag itself is creating that form to hold all of that dirt inside. So in the end, after we've tamped everything, we've compressed these bags, and as they dry, they're going to become these really nice solid bricks. And that's where kind of the other aspect of the sandbag dome too is not only with water and tamping, but because we're tamping and compressing every layer of bag, and then we're also stacking more bags, we're creating a lot of weight. So this is what's going to enable the walls to really have a lot of rigidity to them and holding their shape and just being able to hold the form in general. And I don't want to forget to mention that I'm usually just bringing a couple of jugs of water. So about 14 or 15 gallons of water I'm using. And that amount of water is really nice because I'm able to pretty much get a full row of sandbags done, which equates to about the full day of work basically. So I'm able to get one row of sandbags done per day. And that also means that I'm not having to carry as much water weight around on the daily. So only having to carry 14 gallons of water. I mean, other people can definitely get a tote set up. We could have a tote set up basically to have a good stash of water, but I don't have an extra tote right now. So we're just doing the jugs right now, and that just keeps it a little more manageable, especially if you have a smaller vehicle too. I mean, I have a truck, so I can haul a little bit more, but this makes it all that much more manageable even if you don't have a bigger vehicle like a truck. So having sandbags and the little bit of water and then using the materials on the landscape, we're really cutting down on the materials that we have to kind of bring in, and therefore we're cutting down on weight and then fuel and a lot of other costs. All right, so I had gotten the 4th level up, and I had already gone ahead and got all the barbed wire wrapped around the full dome. That barbed wire is a little bit of a pain in the butt. I've kind of found the technique a little bit of wiggling it and kind of sewing it into the bags all the way around. But this is one of the most important parts here now, is getting the window frames installed. So I'm actually going to install a window frame on this south end. And then we're also going to install one on the north end. Also going to install one on the north end, which is close to the cooling tube. So that's the little square box that I haven't really gone over, is that's going to be space for the underground earth cooling tube concept that we're going to incorporate into this dome. I had to switch to a different angle. That sun was just right in my eyes. But now that I'm on the 4th level and ready to install the window frames, now this is going to be nice because the window frames are going to fill in some space. So that means less bags that I have to fill for each row. But then the way that I'm going to hunker the window frames in is creating these plates with spikes or these nails that are poking out from underneath the plywood. And so I've also done this to the door frame, and essentially what I'm going to do is every other level of sandbags we're going to be installing these little cleat plates, and in that way we're actually hunkering down the framing, but then we're also incorporating the framing into the wall itself. So that's why it'll be important that all of this is level and plumbed out, so that we're just creating a nice straight wall and that everything fits together real nicely. So that's a little bit the spacing that I'm gonna have to do with the windows as well, because I need to position these in a certain spot where the sandbags will still kind of continue the staggered brick stacking essentially. And it's just kind of the nice part with the overall design that I have and that I'm building up to. You'll find out real quick that these aren't going to be necessarily structural, but you'll find that these are actually not going to be supporting any weight necessarily. They're just going to be more so incorporated into the bags. So once we get to higher up on the sandbags, then I'll be able to show a little bit on how the roof is going and how we're kind of connecting everything. So obviously part of the concept with this build is using the materials as efficiently and effectively as possible, but also we're trying to make efficient and effective use of our own time and our own labor. So that's where, when getting all the materials that I need for filling the sandbags, that's where, when just starting out and getting the sandbags, I needed to clear out the front area in between the two domes, because we actually have in the plans for a separate little storage room kind of deal. So I needed to excavate this area out, and before that even, there was all the material that I had already kind of piled up from digging on the inside. So we've used all of that material in this area, and then I've also used all of the material digging down for the separate room. You can get a little bit of an idea. All this dirt that I've excavated and sifted in this little area, this is how far it's gotten us with all of the sandbags. So in that sense, what I'm going to be doing moving forward is we're not going to have to travel out too far. We're going to be smart about this. I'm going to end up sifting this mound that's all around the dome from the initial excavation, and then that way we'll start separating all the materials, because we still want to pile up a whole lot of the rocks up against the sandbags and essentially creating good drainage. And then we're also helping a little bit of the resistance from critters and anything that wants to dig at or try and dig at the bags. So now that I've got the sifting station set up next to the mound, next to the dome, I'll be continuing to sift for all the remaining sandbags that I got to do, but I've actually ended up digging out a pit right next to the sifter. And if anyone had noticed before, I was using the little kiddie pool, and now the little kiddie pool has a bunch of little holes in it. From me using the little hoe and everything else for mixing. So the longevity of those little pools aren't very long. So I've dug the pit, and now we're going to start mixing in the pit. There's a little bit of pros and cons to mixing in the bare pit like this. We're going to lose a little bit of moisture, I think, to some of the surrounding dirt, but in the long run, we're actually going to be able to mix a whole lot more and get a lot more sandbags filled off of one batch. So I've already done a real good amount of sifting, and we've already piled up that much more waste material. And since I've got all this material piled up and I got to move it out of the way anyway, guess that means
the came, a stubborn beast.